Welcome to Lunch Money. Coming up, what are you most likely to get scammed on in 2024? A crackdown on inflation-busting mobile phone and broadband price hikes, and stick around to find out whether a Santa rally can deliver the gifts this year. Hello, I'm Simon Lambert, and joining me on today's Lunch Money is This Is Money's Lee Boyce and Richard Hunter from the show sponsor, Interactive Investor. Lee, we've discussed the explosion in online and social media scams on previous Lunch Money episodes. Now we've had a warning from one of Britain's biggest banks about the things people are most likely to get scammed on next year. Tell us, what are they?
Yeah, so it's a real hot list of what scammers are going to be looking to exploit next year from people that are basically looking to get tickets for one. So ticket scams have exploded this year. So we're talking about sporting events and we're talking about concerts here. Concerts in particular, 529% purchase frauds have gone up this year compared to previous year. And they're predicting that more next year. So Lloyds have flagged Taylor Swift. So there's going to be scammers out there looking to swiftly take your cash if you're looking for those tickets. So if you're fearing of missing out, it's that kind of thing. The other two events that they picked out next year as well as the Olympics and the Euros, because there'll be lots of people that want to go and support our athletes or go and support their nation in the Euros next year. So watch out for those ticket scams. Next thing up is vehicle scams. They're up 74% this year, and they are saying Ford Fiestas, BMW 1 Series and VW Transporters are the ones to watch out for, particularly. Designer goods, Nike, UGG, Louis Vuitton and Chanel. The scams involving those kind of brands are up 23%. Pet scams are up 24%, particularly dogs and certain breeds, and the breeds are Yorkshire Terriers, Rottweilers, Pomeranians. And also coming into especially January, in the first two weekends of January, lots of people start to try and book flights and holidays. So there's lots of those kind of scams coming around. So if you are hunting for a bit of sunshine next year in January, be warned.
So why is it that these things are the things that people are most likely to get scammed on? I mean, I know as a parent who tried to get Taylor Swift tickets for me and my daughters and my wife and couldn't get my hands on them, that there's definitely a bit of what you refer to there as FOMO, that fear of missing out, and I would really want to get them. Is that what the problem is? People acting because they've got that FOMO, they just want to get that thing?
Yeah, especially for tickets. You think we're coming off the back of the pandemic, lots of people didn't do things for a year, 2 years, and they're making up for lost time almost, I feel. And concert tickets are definitely one of those things that children bug their parents for, but also you and I know we also have bands and musicians that we want to see, and if you miss out on those tickets, you kind of would do anything to get them, and that's what scammers are looking to exploit. The same for sporting events. If it's your team playing in quarter final, semi-final, the final, you might do things that are out of the ordinary to try and get those tickets. So there's that. In terms of vehicle scams, there's been quite a bit of desperation trying to get, if you need to get a new car kind of quickly, you might be doing things that you might not necessarily usually do because you spot a bargain, you think, I need to buy that second-hand car now. We've talked about this on the show before about used car prices. They're coming down a little bit now, but they're still far higher than they were pre-pandemic. In designer goods, I think a lot of those brands that we mentioned at the start of the show aren't usually discounted. So people might see a bargain, 50% off some Nike Jordans, for example, and go, cool, that's a good deal. I'm not really thinking about it. Just click on a link, and then before you know it, you're down a rabbit hole. Pets, lots of people want those kind of certain breeds. They see the cute pictures and they might again go, oh yeah, and then you get manipulated by a scammer. And in terms of holidays, it's just about, holidays are really expensive, and if you're on sort of social media and you see something that looks really good and you see the bright beaches, they hook you in, and that's what they're looking to do, exploit you that way.
So it appears it's things where there's an emotional attachment,
yep,
and also things where you think you might be getting a very good price or where you're willing to pay over the odds. And
exactly.
Those are the red flags to think, okay, hang on a minute, am I about to make a bad move here? What are the other things that people can do to protect themselves if they are buying these things genuinely?
Yeah, so first of all, it's worth pointing out here that 4 in 5 purchase scams at the moment are originating from social media. So treat everything you see on social media with a massive pinch of salt, do lots of due diligence, make sure you're buying from a reputable retailer or whoever the company is. There's lots of, in our lives these days, sort of I would call idle scrolling on your phone looking at these social media sites. And sometimes it almost like switches your brain off, and it might not make you as alert as you usually are. And you see something flash up and it's like an advert, and you think, well, if it's an advert on social media, it must be legit. Take your time and just don't act rashly. Never hand over any money, especially with things like vehicles and pets. Like if you get asked for a deposit, to make sure you're not going to miss out. Treat that again with massive caution. Something like Facebook Marketplace does not have payment protections, so it makes it quite difficult potentially to get your money back. And if it's a deal that looks too good to be true, don't be worried about fear of missing out. It's just about taking your time and going, do you know what? Yeah, of course that there would never be 50% off that, or of course I wouldn't be able to get a 5-star holiday somewhere for £200 for a week, that kind of thing. It's just about being switched on and not getting hooked in.
Okay, well, in other news today, we have had Ofcom say that it's going to crack down on something that drives people absolutely nuts. Broadband and mobile phone companies hiking their prices by more than inflation. What's happening here? Yeah,
so Ofcom have actually finally come out this morning and said, you know what, there's got to be something that needs to be done by this. Complaints about these baked-in contract hikes have been going up massively this year. So they had double the amount of complaints between January and October this year compared to last year. That's Ofcom. And they've obviously turned around and gone, do you know what, this is a growing problem. So when you sign up for a mobile deal or a broadband deal or a TV package, for example, quite often in the small print of the contract, it will say your contract can rise in April by RPI plus 3.9%. Now the problem, there's a few problems with this. First of all, that is almost like a telecoms provider saying to you, do you know what inflation is going to be later in the year and then next year and potentially the year after if you're in a 2 or 3 year contract? That's absolutely impossible. The average person on the street doesn't understand the difference between RPI and CPI for one, and getting your head around inflation anyway is quite confusing. So what Ofcom wants providers to do is to lay out in pounds and pence what those hikes will be, so you know when you sign up what you're letting yourself in for, because we have had obviously very high inflation in the last couple of years. RPI is always typically higher than CPI, so they use that higher rate of inflation anyway, and that means we've seen double-digit hikes in April. And I think enough is enough. That is a sizable expense for people. Mobile phone contracts these days, some people pay completely, really high amounts, 50, 60, 70 quid. If you're getting a 10% hike, that's quite a sizable difference over the course of the year. So it seems like Ofcom is finally going to try and wrestle something. These are proposals. They're talking about bringing it in potentially in February or ironing out the rules. And it has been met with a lot of kind of enthusiasm by people that have been campaigning for this. So fingers crossed that things will get fairer for consumers.
And a sign of how lucrative this is for the companies, it's actually dented their share prices today. And it always seems quite galling, doesn't it, that you sign up to a contract that you're not allowed to get out of, yet they can change the price during it.
But it's in your terms and conditions, and that's how they always get away with it. But how many of us really go through the fine-tooth comb, and how many of us would know how much that really does mean for your monthly bill? And if we're talking about broadband, TV, mobile, all of those things combined, it can add hundreds of pounds onto your bill that you haven't quite factored in over the course of a couple of years. And we're all getting signed up for longer contracts these days. Sometimes now on mobile deals, for example, they literally have a standard 36 months. They try and put you into 36-month deals rather than 24-month deals. So it's impossible to know what that's going to be in a couple of years' time, and that's what Ofcom, I feel, are trying to get on top of.
Thank you, Lee. Richard, it's that time of year when investors hope for a Santa rally to boost their returns. So we're going to talk about whether they're getting it. But first, what is a Santa rally?
Well, we've got stock market historians who like to crunch the numbers and come up with trends. And then obviously, although it's no guarantee it's going to happen this particular year, what you'll find traditionally, for example, is that October can be a poor month for stocks and markets generally. By the same token, December tends to be a good one. And so out of that has emerged the basic idea that a Santa rally in the midst of the festive season is something which investors can look forward to as often as not.
And are we seeing one this year? And is there a difference between the UK and the US markets?
Yes to both. The US rally that we're seeing at the moment started in November after a particularly poor October. There's now seen to be more visibility in terms of the fact that the US is obviously taming inflation. It's likely that the interest rate hiking cycle is over, and it's possible, very possible, that we'll be seeing some interest rate cuts maybe around summer next year in the States. So in terms of visibility, that's something that's given investors a lot of succor. And during November and thus far in December, the US market has been on something of a tear. The UK, in contrast, and we've spoken about this before, has tended to be a bit of a laggard. It's still several hundred points away from its all-time highs, which it only hit in February of this year. And any number of factors have worked to get against it. Despite the fact that it's an internationally exposed index, we also know that the UK is rather something of an investment pariah at the moment. So again, over the first few days of December, the UK has been mildly positive, but certainly not to the extent that we're seeing in the States at the moment.
So if Santa maybe came early, but very early this year in November, does it look like he's going to arrive again before Christmas for the stock market?
One would hope so. And of course, the other thing that would work in our favour there is simply momentum. Now that US investors are more confident that they're starting to get a handle on where the Federal Reserve is coming from in terms of its rate hiking policy, is going to relieve some of the pressure that markets were under earlier in the year, particularly those high growth stocks, and particularly within that, the mega cap technology stock, for example. The Nasdaq index is up 36% or so in the year to date. Even the traditional Dow Jones index has recently put on a run to be up around 10%. From our own domestic viewpoint, the FTSE 250 is still down marginally in the year to date, let's say 0.4%, but that's a better position it was in 3 to 4 weeks ago. So perhaps there's a mini Santa rally going on in the FTSE 250, which certainly isn't hitting the headlines at the moment.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Pleasure.
That's all for today's Lunch Money. You can catch all the previous shows at thisismoney.co.uk/Lunch Money, or search for This Is Money on YouTube. And if you are watching there, please consider doing us a little favour and tap that like button and the subscribe one. Thank you very much for watching, and join us for the next show on Thursday. Goodbye.